This time on Poll Hub, the new president is more popular as he starts his term than the last one was at any point during his term. But as we'll see, that's a low bar. Still, what does Joe Biden's relatively high approval rating actually mean? Well, it may have something to do with how he and congressional Democrats are proceeding with their new COVID relief bill. We'll discuss that. And then a blast from the past. We've got a census update. You know how much we love the census in polling. Lots to do, so let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Jay DeDapper, Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
And I'm Miringoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
And the gang's all here. We're back.
Mary
is in the executive producer chair, having done a great job of co-hosting last week.
Absolutely.
I think she should pinch it for all three of us now that she's shown the ability to replace two of us at one time.
I love that idea. Yeah, we could just take a week off. Yeah, that sounds good. Here's a guy who can't take a week off, the president. Joe Biden's been president now for a couple of weeks. And as we always do, as all pollsters do, you want to get what's called a baseline. You want to find out where he's at the beginning of his term in terms of how Americans feel about him, his approval rating, what they like, that kind of stuff. And we've done that. And currently, at this point in time, 49% of Americans approve of the job he's doing and 35% disapprove, which leaves an interesting number we don't generally see later on in the term, which is 16% are unsure. So let's talk about that.
Well, I would just jump in and say, this looks, everybody, get yourself braced. This looks like a return to something more normal.
Oh,
this
geez,
is the old
Lee.
Political honeymoon, perhaps.
Well, in a very polarizing time, because 49% is, it's a lot given what we've seen over the last 4 years. But
higher than Donald Trump had at any point in his 4 years.
I know, but comparatively speaking, we're not back on track to honeymoon times of other presidencies.
This isn't Bill Clinton or Ronald Reagan.
No, but I would suggest, and we know these polls aren't predictive, but Jay mentioned the unsures, and that number is 16%, which is mostly independents, a lot of whom are leaning democratically or pure independents. Those are folks that they're on the fence and sort of taking a wait and see. People a little cautious before they give an endorsement. Those are folks, look, if he gets half of those, he's already pushing 60%. And then you guys would grant me the honeymoon.
Well, I think one thing that I did take away from this, which I think is significant, is that although the approval number is at 49%, as you mentioned, Jay, 35% disapprove. And that's a plus 14. That's 14 points on the positive side. And, in this time period, that is a really big deal. Lee, as you mentioned, the independents are going to be crucial to Joe Biden. They're sitting in the middle. Some are Democrats, some are Republicans, some just identify as people who don't want to identify with either party. And 22% of them, 1 in 5, are taking a wait and see on this president. And you're right, Jay, it's not, certainly not the approval rating that we have seen at the start of many presidencies, but certainly very, very different from the underwater numbers of a 39% approval rating we saw with Trump in his first approval rating beginning in 2017, and much higher than he ever received during his presidency.
What happens if the Republicans who are going through this identity crisis, or at least wrestling to some degree, I'm not sure, it's certainly not an even split right now, but they're having a lot of internal workings, trying to figure these out.
Well, the Trump versus non-Trump,
yes, and it's not
members of the Republican Party, which is more, I think, which is actually more in in the House and Senate than among public opinion.
What happens in the public opinion where there are some, the 10 to 20% of Republicans who are unhappy with what may be going on in the House right now, and if the Democrats don't go through a similar civil war internally, because they stay more unified, does Joe Biden have a chance of picking up a few Republicans along the line that he doesn't have?
I mean, there's a lot of ifs in there. That's probably a
That was a
that's
mountain
a
of
quadruple
hypotheticals.
hypothetical, which in the Olympics, gets you extra points from the judges, but I'm not sure that works here. I'm interested in another piece of this, and that is we asked about uniting versus dividing, and we asked in 2017, 36% said Trump was uniting the nation, 57% said he was dividing it. It's almost flipped, almost perfectly. 55% say Biden's doing more to unite than divide the country. There's been a lot of talk about this unity thing, though, and whether because of the way, for instance, the COVID relief package, which we'll talk about in a minute, is proceeding, or because of the way he's done a lot of executive orders, that he's not really living up to the unity thing. And I just have my question about that is, does unity or unifying the nation, does that mean getting Republicans in Congress or some of them to agree with you? Or does that mean doing what a vast majority of the public wants you to do? Because if you look at the public opinion polling numbers on some of the things that he's done with executive orders, they're broadly popular. They're very popular. So what's the definition of unifying in this case?
Well, I think one of the things that's very interesting, which we have seen over the last number of years, and actually since the Republicans had made such gains in Congress during the Obama administration, and that is Republicans have been much less likely to want to compromise on things. They've seen that as a real negative. When we measure that in a campaign setting, they want their representatives to be standing on principle and not to compromise. I think what's interesting this time around, as we've seen this change in the Congress to Democrat control and a Democrat in the White House, that we may be seeing some movement in those perception as well. In other words, it now may be Democrats who are not too fond of compromising, who think their legislators and their president should move ahead. And Republicans are the ones that are looking for unity and compromise. So some of this may be, you know, it, where you stand depends upon where you sit. And right now, I think that for the Republicans who are in leadership positions, certainly unity means compromise, particularly on policy and legislation. But I think you make a really good point, Jay, that a number of the policy positions that Biden has taken right out of the starting block have been very popular ones among the general public.
Yeah, and if you have coronavirus as it is, and if you have the economy as it is, and concern about the environment and immigration and healthcare and all the rest, then you start saying, well, are people interested in unity, which is a process, or are they interested in results? And I think right now, if Joe Biden had a choice, I mean, he met with the Senate Republicans, but then when they didn't want to come with the numbers he wanted, he then immediately went back to his original $1.9 trillion proposal, which will get changed, I assume, somewhat modified down the road in terms of the money that's being given and all those things. But it's certainly more result oriented. And I think, unlike maybe the Obama years, Joe Biden understands that you sort of got your couple months here to really drive your agenda, and he is really not only with the executive orders but now legislatively, he's really trying to move things along and use the crisis that we're in to enact some of the things that he thinks and the country, as you say, want to do.
One other thing on the unity thing is the impeachment, which we're on the verge of a second impeachment trial. The impeachment's already happened. He's been impeached twice. And we ask about that as well, which is, do you think that the Senate should convict? Because the impeachment happens in the House. That's the grand jury, if you will. And then the conviction or the acquittal happens in the Senate. The trial is in the Senate. And 50% of Americans in our poll, and there's a couple other polls, there's a new Quinnipiac poll out as we record this, same number, 50% of Americans think that the Senate should convict Trump on the charge of inciting the insurrection at the Capitol. 41% think he should be acquitted. Those numbers actually very much parallel his approval, disapproval numbers, kind of inverse for most of his presidency. But is this going to make any difference that the public supports it when the fact is right now there's almost no chance that there'd be enough Republicans to actually go ahead and convict him?
Yeah. You need 2/3, and at this point, that's a long way away. So I think this has to do probably more with both sides making their points, and then they move on.
Does it further divide the nation, though? Because one of the arguments being made is, well, this isn't unity, this isn't unifying, this is divisive if you're going to impeach the president after he's left office. Do you think that resonates with the American people?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, well, you think it would, but I'm starting to think that Donald Trump is going to become less part of the arena of our day-to-day stuff. I think he already has, and I think we're going to move away from that. And I'm not sure just how relevant he's going to be down the road. So I'm not sure how significant, how long lasting this is. Remember when the first impeachment came along, we thought that's all we were going to be talking about for the campaign, and it was nothing we were talking about. So I think right now it may be not as important, impactful.
Well, there certainly are a lot of polarizing issues, but I think one thing that came out of the election, which most Americans agree on, is that um, we need to shore up the economy and we need to take care of and resolve the issue of the pandemic. And I think that was the charge for whomever won. Whether it was Biden or Trump, those are the two most important issues on Americans' minds, and certainly, um, what's top of mind and top of agenda for President Biden. No better example than his $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, which attempts to not only boost the economy, but also get Americans vaccinated. There are huge expectations for him in a CNN poll done just last month, and I think before he took the oath of office and before we saw his stimulus bill itself, but 84% of Americans have high expectations that he's likely to be able to put together and sign into law another stimulus bill to deal both with the economy and the coronavirus. How much of his presidency and his political capital depends upon his ability to put many of these policy pronouncements forward, not just in executive order, but in terms of law?
Lee, you're uncharacteristically silent. Come on, jump in.
I would say it's no, I was going to say very quickly, it's all in. I mean, I think for him, this is it. I mean, you know, if he doesn't get some of these campaign promises enacted legislatively, then I think that, with the majority, as slight as it is in both the Senate and the House, but with public opinion, with the situation as it is, um, look, he's not going to get exactly what he's proposing. They may tighten the eligibility requirements, for example, in terms of the money, so that it'll be,
The stimulus, the direct stimulus checks.
yeah, yeah. It may, and they may pull out the minimum wage from this. They may do something with aid to state and local governments. I think, look, this is how you get one senator on board versus another one. Manchin of West Virginia's key, so you want to make sure he's with you. So I think that this is a big deal, as Joe Biden is famous for having said in an earlier context. This is a big deal, and he needs to do it.
It's a big deal that purely on political grounds totally works, because there's the Quinnipiac poll this week asked the question about both the stimulus relief bill and the $1,400 stimulus payments. 78% of Americans support the $1,400 stimulus payments to Americans. If Republicans are on the record voting against that, well, look at Georgia. $1,400 stimulus payment was on the agenda and on the ballot in Georgia, and look what happened. It's not the only reason that happened, but that's, it's worth talking about. The stimulus relief bill, which is described, accurately in the question that was asked of Americans, $1.9 trillion stimulus relief bill, 68%, including 37% of Republicans, support that. So if Joe Biden's going to bet it all on something, he's got good pollsters out there telling him, yeah, this is the one to bet it all.
Do you find it interesting though too? Because some of these proposals, and I'm thinking particularly of the stimulus checks, was something that was proposed by President Trump. Late in the campaign. Do you find it odd or not surprising at all that the Republicans have actually seemed to take that as the one of the major points that they want Biden to back down on?
Well, I was going to say, I was going to go in a totally different direction. I'm thinking, what would the election have been? The results have been had something like this passed on October 20th, or whatever, going into the election, given how close it was. I think the absence of that, given how you guys are talking about how popular these things are, I think it this is just big big stuff, and I think it is going to go through. I think there's going to be a lot of legislative things. It's not going to be FDR. It's not going to be the New Deal. I mean, he had a huge majority in the House and the Senate in the 30s to work with. This is not that situation, but given the polarization that exists, and the notion that Congress has not been effective at all, I think this is going to feel procedurally like a new day, and it's going to feel legislatively like a new day.
Look, he ran on one essential platform. I mean, the reason that the vast majority of people who were on the fence, if they were on the fence, voted for Joe Biden is because of coronavirus, right? I mean, this is the Trump team itself has acknowledged both privately to reporters and publicly that that's what cost. They think that's what cost them the election is the coronavirus and then the way it was handled. So he's betting it all on this. There's good public support for him betting it all on it the way he's doing it. He's got very strong support. I think that what Republicans risk doing here is becoming even more kind of outside of the conversation and looking more and more like not a serious political party, but kind of just that nagging rock in your shoe. And that's, there's been lots of predictions in 2008. Oh, the end of the Republican Party forever. To talk to them in 2010 and see if Democrats thought that. Things happen very quickly in American politics. Things can turn on a dime, and I'm sure they will turn on a dime in some ways during the first 2 years of this administration. But this seems like, if you're in the shoes of Joe Biden and his political people, and on policy terms, this seems like the best possible thing that you could be doing for all reasons, political and real, the policy reasons, the best possible thing that you could be doing at this stage, 3 weeks into his presidency.
Yeah, and we saw it before we move on, we saw it in terms of our national index, the National Outlook index scores that we've been taking monthly. And yeah, jobs, more healthcare, a just and fair society. These are all the things that are showing people really want. And that fits really in with this agenda. So, it's coming together, not a perfect storm, but it's certainly coming together. But one of the things that hasn't come together, talking about rough segues, is the census. This is what we've been following this story for, unfortunately, for I guess over a year now, or about a year. Um,
Oh,
I think it's been 2 years.
it's been a
I don't
long
know.
time. Yeah, it's been quite a
Episode
while
2, I
because
think we
remember
covered.
we had. Yeah, I mean, because I think the Trump administration had also, challenged the wording
Oh
on the
yeah, way back
questions
when,
and how
sure.
the count
The-
was going to be done. So this has been an
Okay,
ongoing
so by
saga.
brief review, the census is a big deal for pollsters. We need the numbers, we need accurate numbers, but more significantly,
Oh, we love numbers. We
yeah, we
need the
need the numbers for
numbers.
pollsters, but for the country, we need to have these determine allocations, and a lot of money flows as a result of population, and it also, for political reasons, and then therefore policy, it shapes the redistricting, the lines that are drawn that determine state legislative offices and the Congress at a national level. And right now, the deadlines have passed. Uh, we're sort of in a, the term paper didn't get handed in. We have, a semester extension going on, but, we're going to probably get some apportionment data by the end of April, maybe the redistricting data by July. But this is not a pretty picture.
So does this make a difference? So Barb, I mean, you deal with the data, that we use, the census data in order to do polling, right? It's critical that we have accurate census data. Does it matter that it's a few months late from the standpoint, it's not about redistricting, but from the standpoint of how the census data is used by so many other industries and so many other people? Does it matter that it's a few months late if it's right?
It actually is. It actually doesn't matter at all. I mean, the where it really matters is in the political realm. There are state elections, local elections that are going to be held, and it has an impact upon the redistricting for those elections. And so, for pollsters and people who follow these numbers, so that they can better understand. The population. We can better understand who it is that we're polling and making sure that it's representative for those businesses that are using this for market analysis. A few months doesn't matter. What really matters is the accuracy of these numbers. And so for the census to be taking a few more months to make sure that these numbers are as accurate as can possibly be for having been collected during a pandemic makes a lot of sense for
But the pressure is going to be on the legislative districts, and that's where the pressure, the delay shows up. But one of the things you mentioned, we've come full circle from challenging, who would be part of the count to now the Obama administration not even probably providing the data on non-citizens.
the Obama
People are going to.
administration.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should say that, the Biden administration. Where am I
Okay.
today? But but in terms of, whether these non-citizens, whether they are in the count, and this is going to
Which
be, yes,
historically
they will.
I mean,
They always have
everyone
been,
always
but that
has
was the
been.
challenge. That was the Trump challenge. And not only is that now being rejected, we're going right back to where the census normally has been done. So for all this, hemming and hawing, we're trying to, the country's trying to, at least the Biden administration is trying to get the census back on track.
And we promise you, but this will happen. We will give you another census update on a future episode of Poll Hub.
Wow,
but for now,
can't wait.
I know, very exciting. That'll do it for this edition of Poll Hub with the census bonus. Poll Hub's a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff, our production supervisor. Amelia Morell and Leo Ruiz are our production assistants. And Marcella Bettman is our editor.
And we, as we note every time, depend upon the Roper Center, which I would like to point out at this, which we haven't mentioned. They have 23,000 studies there from 100 different countries. So this is a massive archive, which we draw on, and lots of other folks do too.
And if you have any questions or comments, we love to hear from you on any social media platform, wherever you are. We are at Marist Poll on Twitter, Marist Poll on Facebook and Instagram. And finally, if you like what you hear on Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review on your podcasting app of choice. Positive reviews help others find us. And while you're at it, please, if you haven't already, please subscribe. Thanks for listening and stay safe.